All right. Hello and welcome to the first Product Tank event of the year. We're thrilled to have you with us today. As you know, the topic for today is creating product centricity within organizations. And we have an exciting lineup of speakers. But before that, I want to take this opportunity to just introduce what Product Tank is. I'm sure a lot of you will be aware, but this is just a refresher as well. So Product Tank was founded in 2010 in London, and now today spans over 200 cities. It's the world's largest product community. It's by the product people and for the product people. Product Tank in general is an informal meetup that brings together the local product community in each of these cities. Whatever your role in product, you're always welcome. If you would like to get involved in Product Tank events, whether that's getting involved in the community or leveling up your career, that's through speaking at a Product Tank event, hosting or sponsoring a Product Tank event, writing for mindtheproduct.com, or if you would like to get more content aside from these talks and events, then please join through the mindtheproduct.com/join link you can see on your screens right now. As we mentioned on the meetup page, there is a Q&A section today at the end. If you would like to join and contribute towards the questions, then please join at slido.com. And at the top, when it asks for a code, then please enter #product-centric. Right, so without further ado, let me hand it over to Calvin, who will speak to us about how to create product-centric organizations.
Thanks, Kunal, and evening, everyone. So, as Kunal said, I'm going to talk to you all today a little bit about creating product-centric organizations, and in particular, we're going to focus in on the corporate context through, in this transformation. So, first and foremost, just a little bit about myself, what makes me hopefully somewhat qualified to talk about the topic. So, you may have probably guessed already that I'm not British; I'm South African. Minus points if you said Australian or New Zealand. And I'm a software engineer by trade. In particular, my craft is around JavaScript, so front-end technologies. And I've spent most of my career in the financial services industry. So starting out at AIG Insurance, Investec Wealth and Investments, and at AXA Health UK, where I am currently. And as an engineer throughout my career, I started to kind of feel there's something missing, and that something was not really understanding the value of the work that I was doing, and what's ultimately led me to being more involved in product. And about 2 years ago, my current boss was starting up a digital strategy function within AXA Health UK, and brought me over to kind of build our first product management function within the business and really create a strategy for how we'd implement product management within the organization. So that's what we've been doing the last couple of years. And we built that team up to around 10 people, and we're slowly starting to transform the organization. So before we get going, a little bit about the product-led movement and what it means to be product-led. And I'll start that conversation off by saying what it doesn't mean to be product-led. I think a lot of people can misconstrue this statement to think that being product-led is being led by product, as in your product managers make all the decisions for the company, and they're kind of given this carte blanche access to make decisions. But that's not really what it's all about. What it is about is that your customers or your users experience your organization through the lens of your digital products. And this could be through the context of sales or marketing. So a particular kind of technique of product-led is all about product-led growth. So you'll see some common techniques such as freemium models, etc. And this is all about making sure that your business function is experienced through the lens of the product. So, but why should corporates care about being more product-led? Isn't this just something that digital businesses employ to kind of achieve growth, etc.? Is this some sort of fad that corporates don't need to care about? So what I have in front of me here is the Pendo report on the business value to being product-led. And I really like this report because it's something that can be tangible, especially for your more traditional stakeholders, in terms of the value that being more product-led as an organization creates. So a couple of key statistics here in terms of your retention of your customers. So customers investing in being more product-centric have demonstrated higher levels of retention, both on a revenue side and a customer side. And the same thing in terms of growth, showing more leads and acquisitions through that investment in the product experience. That's not just limited to the external factors. It's also seen internally, where users are more productive in businesses that are product-led to those that aren't. Now, obviously, this is all imperative or metric based, but the way I like to think about the value of being product led is the fact that as a product management function, our primary aim is to generate continuous value for the organization. And in times like we're in today, where times can be a bit difficult, we're potentially entering a recession, anyone would want to maximize the return on investment that they're getting for their digital change initiatives. So what do companies and corporates need to be changing within their function in order to be more product led? I want to say everything here, but that would be a bit facetious and maybe a bit negative. So I'm actually going to just focus in on 3 key areas that I believe that through changing within your business, you as an organization can be a little bit more product led. And that's strategy. And that's both from business and product perspective. And these, whilst separate, really work in tandem to set the alignment for the organization. The second thing is structure, and that's both your team structure, but also your organizational structure within the business. And then the third piece is around ways of working, and in particular around a product management process that supports delivery of a product-led transformation. So let's jump right into it, and we'll talk a little bit about strategy, and in particular creating a democratized business and product strategy, and in doing so ensuring that you have alignment across your teams. I went to a talk a few weeks ago where one of the speakers actually spoke about radical alignment. I really like that notion that when you create a strategy that is democratized across your organization, you take everyone in the same direction. So starting out, just looking a little bit, and this is from a very 40,000 foot view around strategy. It's not just this, I promise you, but a really nice way of looking at this is that your business objectives are the activities that ensure that we hit our enterprise-wide targets. And these are kind of articulated in various different ways. What we are trying to do in our organization right now is represent these objectives in the format of objectives and key results. So you're setting semantically where you're trying to get to, and then you're also putting in place measurement frameworks to ensure that every day you're getting a little bit closer to those lofty objectives. Once you have these business-wide objectives, then your product strategy is the clear plan for how your product domain helps the company achieving those longer-term objectives and goals. An interesting thing I like to do here at this point is just kind of reference how many things happen before the formulation of a product roadmap, because people synonymize this product roadmap with the strategy, which is partially correct. But what I see in our organization is someone will just jump to, please, Kelvin, can you show me the product roadmap? We'll be at the start of the year and someone will say, fantastic, can you show me the roadmap? And I really like this quote that I heard, which is that the goal is not to have a product roadmap. The goal is to have a product strategy, and the roadmap is simply a reflection of your strategy, right? And I really like that because there's so many things that go into the formulation of a product strategy. And once you've done that, the hard work is done and your roadmap should be fairly clear. And as a product leader, I really believe it is our job to ensure that this strategy is clear for all of our team and our stakeholders. But a strategy is only as good as what you do with that strategy. And in particular, I think the most practical use case for implementation of your strategy is your prioritization or your value framework within your team. And there's a fantastic quote here again from Marty Kagan, the godfather of product management, which is that your job as a product manager is to deliver a product that is valuable, usable, and feasible. And what we're talking about here in the context of strategy is that value aspect of that statement, right? So when you're implementing your prioritization or value framework, there are many kind of standardized frameworks out there that you can consider. So value versus complexity, fairly straightforward one. RICE, which is reach, impact, confidence, and effort. That's something that we like to use within our organization, or even the Kano model. But there's plenty more. These is just a small excerpt, which is actually taken from the Product Board Guide to Prioritization, which is a fantastic read, by the way, for anyone who's interested. But I don't really worry too much about the frameworks themselves. I think the important thing to focus on is the habits which drive that effective prioritization. Ensuring you have a standardized way to gather new ideas from both your external stakeholders and internal stakeholders. Ensuring that your product managers know how to say no. And usually saying no, but saying why as well. That's super important. And your strategy gives you a framework with which to be able to do that. And then last but not least, ensuring that when you are prioritizing and prioritizing the sequence on your roadmap, that you're doing this objectively rather than subjectively. And you can only really do this if you have the appropriate data to do so. So the second topic I wanted to touch on is structure and structuring your product management function to ensure they're set up for success. And a big part of this for me is the movement away from aligning your digital teams from applications and technology. And what I mean by this is, standard teams within corporates are aligned to say your mobile app has a team or your website has a team. And moving away from that to something that's more aligned to products and platforms, which is something which I particularly gleaned from this McKinsey report on technology-based operating models, which is a fantastic report as well. And the insight that you can see here is that you structure your product teams to create these experiences for your end users or your customers that drive value not only for your customer, but also for your business. It's really imperative that whilst we're kind of solving these customer problems, we're also ensuring we create value for our business. And that's what those product teams are really there set up to do. And there's plenty of ways, by the way, to kind of set up these product teams and how you divide up your business in terms of these product teams. It's a complicated problem. There's many ways to do this in terms of product lines. You can do it in terms of customer journey steps. There's so many ways that you can cut up these product teams. And I'd love to hear in the comments how you guys at your organizations are actually representing your organization in the context of product teams. But these product teams are supported by your platform teams. And in this context, what that means is teams that are creating shared technology components that are then leveraged by multiple product teams in a consistent way to then actually create those valuable experiences for our customers. So these could be things like a common pricing engine or a common customer profile, for example. And these are then used by kind of multiple product teams. So these are your ways of managing your dependencies so that you don't have dependencies between your product teams, but only kind of unilaterally one down from your product team into your platform teams. So once you've set up these product teams, the important next step then is to think, how do we resource up these product teams, right? So, and obviously we're talking about cross-functional teams here, so they'll have engineers, product managers, user experience designers. But in this context, I'm just going to talk a little bit about your product managers and how you make sure that you get your product managers well equipped to make this transition. So the first opportunity to do this is obviously upskilling your existing staff. Now, for us as an organization, what this looked like was that we had multiple people playing the role of product owner, and that was their job. They were hired as a product owner, but that's only in the context of delivery, right? Product owner is just a role on a Scrum team. It's not the job. So we had to make sure we were upskilling these product owners into product managers that really looked at the overall product life cycle. And this meant engaging these kind of educational bodies like Product School, Mind the Product, Reforge, etc., but also by getting common knowledge from Silicon Valley Product Group or again, Mind the Product just opened up their content. So making sure we're upskilling these product owners so that they really understood the discipline of product management. And as you start to grow your product teams, something that's fairly new within the industry, and I'd consider, I'd definitely recommend you consider is the advent of an associate product manager. Now, product management is typically not an entry-level job, as I'm sure you all know. But what the associate product manager does is it gives an entry-level route into what is quite a complicated discipline. And what I'm seeing in the market right now is that this is actually on the rise as well. So I would definitely recommend looking into associate product managers as a way of sustainably growing your product team. Product managers are quite expensive resources, right? So what you can do by introducing an associate product manager is a way to sustainably ensure you're growing that team, as you're kind of going through this transformation. So last but not least, process and building a product management process wherein which agility or agile is not only reserved for the delivery aspect of the process. That's super important, right? Because if you look at agile, people just kind of synonymize that with Scrum and think, yeah, agile, well, that's about delivery, right? And really what I'm talking about here is ensuring that agility is embedded throughout the process. But the first thing to tackle, especially in corporates, is this idea of project management versus product management. And the reason I say it's so imperative is because pretty much all digital change within organizations that I'm seeing are predicated on the fact that a project needs to be constructed, funded, and resourced in order to drive any digital change. And the reason that this is such a problem is because you're pulling together teams to solve a discrete challenge that is almost fixed in scope, fixed in time, and fixed in budget. And it really limits the amount of innovation that we can have within a product team to creatively solve problems that drive value. But the main problem for me with project management versus product management is that for a project, your success is pretty much, did I deliver my scope, right? Whereas what we're talking about throughout this whole conversation is product management is all about delivery of value. So for a product, in terms of success, what we're talking about is the fact that they have solved a problem and it drives the business strategy forward in some meaningful way, whether that's reduction in cost, whether that's increase in revenue. That's what denotes value for a product team, and that's the main difference between these two. But if you start with a project, it kind of infiltrates your entire process. The way you report to your stakeholders, the way you gather requirements, and I really think that that's a core thing to solve up front if you're making this transition. And once you have made that transition, then it's super important that your product teams then have the correct ways of working to operate within once you have those durable product teams set up. Now, this diagram on the right-hand side here is from Product Board's Guide to Product Discovery. Again, a fantastic ebook, which I love. And I actually use this image to represent how we aim to implement our product management process within our organization. And I won't kind of touch on every aspect of this process, but I will give a few key points. So the first one being, as I've been talking about throughout, this process is completely hinges on a clear strategic vision, both from a business perspective, but also a product perspective. Everything within this process is geared towards driving us towards that objective of that or that vision. The second thing is discovery is continuous, right? And ideas are going to be permanently coming into your product team from both externally to the product team or opportunities you identify within the product team. And as such, discovery needs to continuously happen in parallel with delivery. It's not like within a project that you see traditionally where you've got a 3-month discovery up front and then you just do delivery for 9 months, right? It happens continuously in parallel with your kind of delivery. The third thing here is, as you're going through product discovery, you need to be removing opportunities that aren't valuable or aren't going to move you towards your strategic vision in the most efficient and optimized way. And in doing so, what you're doing is you're saving time and resources that are going to be really expensive to work on these non-valuable features later on. And last but definitely not least, your feature or your opportunity is only done once you can demonstrate that the value is delivered to your customer. That's super important. All too often, I see that features are being marked as done. And in the definition of done, we're seeing, yeah, I've delivered against the scope that I said I'd deliver, but did it solve the problem? You said that you were going to drive 50% reduction in efficiency of a particular business process. Did you achieve that? Are you seeing that process now takes less time? And if not, then your delivery is not complete. You need to iterate upon that opportunity. So I think that's super important to define that a feature is only done once the value is delivered. And then if you get all of this really working together, a key principle of the double diamond framework, which is a core tenet within design thinking, is ensuring that we build the right product. So we choose the right things to focus on as a product team, as well as build it in the right way during delivery. And then you can truly say you're agile throughout the product lifecycle. Now, I did say I was only going to focus on 3 things, but I will make a special mention for the rise of product operations within the product management discipline. And this is a function within a kind of a sub-function within product management teams that is really on the rise right now. We can see that this is growing. You looked at the LinkedIn statistics on product ops, and more roles are available than ever, and it's really growing at the moment. But what is product operations outside of the classic product management Venn diagram? Product operations is all about ensuring that the product management team have the right tooling and they're equipped with the right tooling to do their job, that the processes within product management are geared up towards what I was talking about earlier, all of those problems, are we solving them within the process effectively and efficiently? Does the product management team have the right data to empower and inform their decisions, and that they are coached and ready to perform their job as a product management function? But ultimately, I kind of summarize this as the product ops job is to ensure that the product function is operating efficiently and effectively. And just kind of a big part of this is obviously that team has the right tools for the job. I won't jump into all of these tools, don't worry. But I will just say it's important that as you make this transition into product management, that you evaluate your tooling landscape, ensure that your team is kind of set up with the right tools to do their job. So what could possibly go wrong? And my GIF is obviously not animating, but what could possibly go wrong in the words of Jack Sparrow? And I'll just talk a little bit about some of the challenges that we faced whilst making this transition to being more product-led. The first one is that change is emotional, and it's about people. And what we try to do is be super logical. I'm a logical person. I'm an engineer, and I'm trying to be logical in explaining a change that is going to impact people's jobs, impact people's careers, the way people work. So people just care about what it means for them. And I think that's really important as you make this transition, is trying to understand people's, how they feel as part of this change. The second thing is product management as a discipline is still fairly nascent. I know it's a fairly long-standing discipline, especially in the US, but in corporate Europe, product management is a discipline. People in my industry still think product managers are the people that derive, the insurance product, the policy documents. So we need to be patient with our colleagues, as we take them on this journey with it. That's super important. That we've got to make sure. I mean, product managers can't even explain what product management is to one another. So how can we expect people who haven't been on that journey with us to understand? So we've got to be patient. The third thing is, for a long time, I was going around the business and evangelizing and running around with strategy decks on what product management is, what it isn't, and trying to make this change. And over the last 12 to 18 months, what I've seen as being most effective is actually by implementing those changes and showing through doing, rather than trying to kind of get this mass scale approval to move forward with a new approach. And last but not least, if the strategy is not clear, you cannot be product led. If you don't know what you're trying to achieve, how will you possibly know how to get there? It's really important that you're clear on your business and product strategy once again. So I'm going to leave you with this, which is a quote that I really love, out of Marty Kagan's book, Inspired, which is by General George Patton. And it's something I think about with my team a lot when I'm trying to ensure that they're empowered, which is that we never tell people how to do things. We tell them what to do or where we're trying to go, and they'll surprise you with their ingenuity in achieving that. So thank you very much. I hope that you have some comments, and I hope that you've enjoyed my talk today.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Calvin. That was incredibly helpful. Speaking to us about how to create product-centric organizations, you mentioned that companies need to evaluate their strategy, structure, and process. And that leads as well to the next talk, because in process, you have the importance of people, and how can we empower people to lead us to product-centric organizations. To elaborate on that, I'll now like to invite Magali.
Great. Thank you very much. Hi, everybody. I'm delighted to talk to you today about product centricity, and I'd like to debunk some of the myths. So we're going to talk, and we're also going to interact together through polls. And we're going to talk about what product centricity really is and what it isn't, starting with a general overview and then taking that people angle. So let's go. I don't know about you, but for me, this is what I see when I look at my LinkedIn feed, webinars, newsletters, and all sorts of content about product management. But is it really what it is? Well, it's really bad. That is the truth. This is what I mean. Like, does anybody else feel like this? If so, put it in the chat. I can see the comments from the YouTube chat. So if you feel like this as a product manager, that's okay. I think product management is messy. Very few people are doing it perfectly right, and it's all a learning process. So I'm going to give you honesty, transparency, openness, and we're going to be true to ourselves, right? Because we're all product managers here. So this is a humble talk about the truth behind the myth of product centricity. But first, why should you listen to me? I'm Magali. I'm the Director of Product and Engineering at RFI, and my current product is actually data. So it's called Data as a Service. In my previous role, I managed more standard SaaS products, and I have an engineering and an economics background. Last year, I also launched the podcast Product Perspectives, which is about the people who interact with product managers. So we got engineers and UX designers, of course, but also marketing, customer support, legal, finance, and even your leadership teams to better understand how we can collaborate better together to make awesome products. Great. So if you're not on Slido yet, I would recommend you go because there's going to be some polls and I would like all of you to participate because it's going to be an exercise to self-reflect as well about you as a product manager, but also about your organization. So please do this. Let's get started with 10 truths behind the buzz of product centricity. Truth number one, there's actually no agreement about what product-centric actually means. So take the definition on one side of product-centric according to online sources. A product-centric organization's goal is to create the best product. For that, they take an inside-out approach. So they take advantage of the latest technological innovation, and they want to differentiate themselves to stand out in the market. They would measure success through product quality and sales, for example. But I see you coming. You're product managers, right? So what do you think? Where's the customer in that definition? And that's the risk with a very narrow and strict definition of product centricity, which tends to focus on the needs of a product over those of the customers. So what about on the other side, customer centricity? Is that any better? Customer-centric companies, they strive to create the best solution to meet the customer's need. Much better. That's an outside-in approach. So they focus on the customer satisfaction and on loyalty. But if you push that a bit too far, you can end up with situations which I think are a bit common, which are adding for one particular customer a particular feature, and it derails completely your roadmap. It's not aligned with your vision anymore. So when you go too far on the customer-centric side, it's not good either. All in all, I think it's not an either-or situation because a good product cannot be built without putting the customer first, right? So now is the time to reflect on yourself. What does product-centric really mean to you? And what does it mean for your team? Are you aligned on that? Go and talk to other product teams. If you're in a bigger organization, there's other product teams. Do they have the same definition of product centricity? Does it apply to the whole company as well? If you're a product leader listening to this live event, maybe it's your responsibility to actually work with your team on what product-centric means to you. Right, let's move on to truth number two. You don't need a product-led growth strategy to be product-centric. So traditionally, companies have used a marketing and sales funnel to think about converting leads into customers. So they see customers as an output. But over the years, the relevancy of that funnel has died out a bit. And now with more digital strategy has come the flywheel. The flywheel looks like this. It's similar to the funnel in that it represents the customer's journey in three main stages, which are attracting, engaging, and then delighting customers. But you can see that this time the customer is at the center of the wheel. So the rotation of the wheel is the growth of your business. Happy customers are the energy that fuels that growth. So everything literally revolves around the customer. And that model works quite well. And it is suitable for most products, in particular if you've got a product that is complex in a sense, or which has a complex buying process, a bit like enterprise products. However, if you've got a transactional product or self-service product, there is a model that works even better, and I'm sure you've heard the term before, it's product-led growth. What does product-led growth mean? It's a business model and it's a marketing strategy in which the product itself is the primary driver of the customer acquisition and revenue growth. In a product-led organization, the focus is on building a product that is so valuable to the customer that it drives adoption and usage on its own, without the need for heavy sales and marketing effort. This is a business model that's often used in software and technology companies, where you can make the product available for free, like a free trial, and then monetize it through subscriptions or upgrades. And it emphasizes the importance of that continuous product development and innovation in order to maintain customer interest and drive growth. So you may not have a product-led growth strategy, but that doesn't mean you can't be a product-centric company. Now, reflect on yourself. What's your current strategy? What's the current strategy of your company, of your product? Is it a product-led growth strategy? And if not, is it a good time to think about implementing a product-led growth strategy? Maybe not now, maybe later, maybe never. Truth number 3, your organization is probably not product-centric, and that's okay. Look at those stats. When I see the stats about product management empowerment and how decisions are made by the loudest person in the room, but also when I talked to some guests in my podcast about the reality of product management, I realized that most organizations aren't product-centric. And if yours is not, that's okay. It's a journey, and you're doing the first step today, which is awareness. So think about it. How do you define your organization? Is it sales-driven, engineering-led? Is it product or customer-centric? And what do you want it to be? And one of the keys to answer that is what drives the product decisions. So let's do that exercise together. So you go on Slido, and the first poll is about, I'm going to show it here. First poll is about which of these terms apply to your organization. So go on to Slido and vote. I see there's already one vote for sales-led, customer-centric. More customer-centric. Good. More sales-led. You're not alone. A bit of engineering-led now. Nobody's really doing that product-led growth. Okay, so mostly sales-led. I think it's really good to compare yourself and to see. This is anonymous, so please be honest and open. Nobody's judging. But yeah, lots of companies are sales-led. Yes, and engineering-led. So this is, I think, a good exercise. Reflect on your team, reflect on your organization, and then do that poll with other people in your organization to see how you're doing. But I think the main takeaway here is you're not alone, don't worry, and that's why you're attending this webinar, I guess, to become more product-centric, right? But you see that here, 50% of the respondents are actually sales-led. So no worries if that's your case too. Good, so let's move on. Thank you for voting. Truth number 4, product-centric is actually people-centric. What you see here is Deloitte's 5 steps to becoming a product-centric organization. And the key is adopting a product-centric mindset. And usually there's a few early roadblocks, like failing to define the foundational elements, like having a misaligned business strategy, having legacy projects, project management practices, measuring the effort instead of the outcome. So there needs to be a major shift in the way the company operates. Step 2 is about rethinking how the organization is structured, how ownership is split between teams, and how people work together. So you see, it's a people initiative. Step 3 is the continuation of this with clear responsibility for product teams to avoid duplication of work and dependencies and encourage cross-functional work. So again, talking about people, their autonomy, their accountability. Okay, I take it step 4 is about the process, because you need processes, right? Having a product delivery playbook, consolidating the tool stack, and having procedure for how to prioritize your features. Okay, that's process. But finally, step 5, the company needs to look at how it supports employees and how it provides them with a clear career path and growth opportunities. So again, that's people. So you see lots of these steps on how to become product-centric are actually focused on people. So think about it and reflect on your own company. Do you focus a lot of your time on process, data, technology, or on people? Is your leadership team on board with the idea of product centricity? And do they understand that it starts with people? The biggest impact, the biggest need is on people? Because yeah, it starts with the employee. Because at the heart of every great product, there is a team of talented individuals. And without that, the product doesn't exist. So you need to inform people, provide them with the information they need to understand the organization and the brand and how customers feel about the organization. You need to inspire them, connect the employees to the vision and the values so they believe that those matter and that they take pride in their job. Instruct them, supporting employees through training, coaching, mentoring, giving them feedback so they can deliver on promises that you do to your customers. Involve them in how to design jobs, improve work processes, and even through customer and employee feedback. And incentivize them through appropriate systems to measure, reward, and reinforce desired behavior. So now think about it. Does your organization offer training and development programs? Do they encourage continuous learning? Do you have a mentor or some coaching available in your company? Do they invest in leadership development? Do they clearly communicate the vision and the strategy? Do they empower individuals? And what about you as a product manager? What do you do with your team? What's your role in all of that? Do you do all of this? But product-centric doesn't mean that people do everything. I said you have a role to play. I didn't say you should play all the roles. What we see here is that the responsibilities of product managers have increased into many areas. You've got customer onboarding, sales enablement, even revenue targets. So you can see on the chart on the right that product teams in leading companies are even involved in digital transformation at the same level as executive teams and almost as much as in and twice as much as in mainstream organizations. So what this means is there's even more demand on product managers to contribute on many areas of the company's operation. But PMs can't do it all because they don't have all the skills and so they don't have the capacity. So think about it. How do you define your role as a product team, as a product manager? What's the scope of your role? What do you decide that you're not involved with? And is this what you want it to be? Also, does the budget, the resourcing, and the goals that the company set for you reflect what your role is? Truth number 7, you can't be product-centric without engaging your stakeholders. Your stakeholders should be here, and that's why when I see things like this, when people don't really look at the roadmap, I'm like, you're missing out on something. So let's do a test. Go back into Slido and answer this question. So you've got different stakeholders. I may have forgotten some. If I have, please put them in the YouTube. And, oops. Oh, rank your stakeholders. Okay, so rank your stakeholders by their product-centric approach. So you have to drag and drop them if you're on your phone, otherwise with your desktop, and choose which ones have the most product-centric approach, which stakeholders get it. If you don't know that, I would say the most likely to get it is if they work very closely with you. You don't have to rank them all. I see some of you not working with your finance and legal teams very often, so don't rank these teams if they're very far from you. Cool, so usually that's what we see. Engineering tends to get it. Yeah, I didn't see many engineering-led companies in the previous poll, so that means engineering is quite on board with that product approach. UX design, that is, I think, your most important partner in being product-centric. So I'm very happy to see it at the top. Customer success, product marketing, yeah, the C-suite, and unsurprisingly, finance and legal at the bottom. Great, let's give you a couple of more seconds to respond. Great. Good to see customer success. They're great partners in that. A bit sad to see product marketing is below customer success, because I think product marketing is a stakeholder we should keep very close. Right, let's carry on. So, So basically, the point I'm trying to make here is that you can be a product manager and all the light is on you, but actually nothing happens without your stakeholders. Your stakeholders are here to support you, and your product wouldn't be as successful without them. Without designers and engineers, of course, but even without customer success, sales, marketing, and even the legal and finance team. I'm sure you don't want to get into some legal trouble with data privacy or things like this. So please make sure that you embark your stakeholders in that journey. Now is the time to reflect. Which stakeholders have you got a close relationship with? Which relationships do you need to work on a bit? And how is that low stakeholder engagement impacting you as a product manager? How is it impacting the product development cycle? And is it impacting your culture as well? Think about this and how you can work better with your stakeholders. Now, truth number 8, it's powered by your culture. It's not just about the skills and expertise of your team. It's also about fostering a culture of collaboration, innovation, and continuous improvement. You want to encourage open communication, transparency, and a willingness to take some risk and learn from your mistakes. So here what you see is the top of the iceberg. It's the visible portion of your culture. It stands for the observable aspect. But beneath it, there are the hidden structures of the workplace culture. And this is actually much bigger. It makes up the larger part, and it's therefore the most important one. So now it's time to reflect and think. If you can identify in your business some unwritten rules or assumptions or beliefs that make your culture. And are these shared across your team only, the product organization, or the entire company? Is your leadership team encouraging the right culture? Or do you sometimes witness us versus them situation? And what role do you play in that? So now is the time again to be honest and open about which situations you have already seen happening in your organization. So we've got sales sold a product or a feature that we didn't have, or it wasn't exactly what we had. You built a customized solution for one or several customers. It wasn't quite aligned with your vision. You measured the success by the effort. We've put that many hours. We did that many story points instead of measuring it by the outcome. You became a bit of a feature factory based on customer and internal requests. Do you get them all? Yeah, and if you've got other examples, please put them into the YouTube. Great. Which one's the most popular? We built customized solutions. Oh, I'm glad to see we're not alone. We're all together in this, and we're gonna change the culture and make things better. Sales, very guilty as well. Measured success by the effort is rather low. Now you think about it, you actually are. Yes, I remember doing that. Great. So again, this is just to show you that you're not alone in that, and it just happens to everybody. So it's not all perfect, and that's okay. Now, don't use Slido, go onto YouTube and read that. And if you have lived that situation before, put a +1. Nobody. Well, lucky you. Cool. Let's do the next one. If you've lived that situation, put a +2 in YouTube. +3. Okay, I see you're not participating, but that's okay. I know that this has happened to lots of you. +4. +5. Cool. So all of these are bad situations that happen, and they happen all the time. So I know that you faced at least one of them, or another one that I don't have it. I don't have here, but it doesn't matter. What matters is this one. When you get a success, okay? Because you can't do it all. You can't sort out the product function and the way your company works all at once. So there will be some things happening, and you have to pick your battles, okay? And think about the bad product practices that you've witnessed in your organization. Did you play a role in these? Could you have done something differently? Did you have the power to change these? Maybe not. And was it worth trying to prevent them from happening? Or maybe they will resolve themselves naturally. And you can expand on that win to other areas. Right, finally, truth number 10 is maybe product-centric is actually dead and we should move to life-centric. Accenture argues that as consumer behavior is changing faster than businesses can keep up, companies must go from product or customer-centric to life-centric. So they need to see their customers as multifaceted and understand the complex external forces that impact them. So they recommend, instead of seeing people as buyers with static personas, seeing people as multidimensional through dynamic data and seeing the impact of life forces. Instead of focusing on financial value and meeting simply the existing needs, focusing on sustainable growth through solving unmet needs, like providing customer value, of course, but social, environmental, and employee value. Instead of overcomplicated, underperforming experiences, thinking about thoughtful connectivity across all customer-facing functions for a simpler, more engaging experience. Instead of extracting incremental growth from existing technology and talent, driving exponential growth by finding new applications for technology and talent outside of industry norms. Instead of misaligned teams that operate in silos and develop organizational inertia, de-silo the team to operate more freely and fuel that organizational energy. So reflect. How do you define your personas? Did you use some data? Is it a static or dynamic persona? What's your mission? Does it only revolve around user needs, or does it also go over the larger social, environmental, or economic issues? How do you define your industry? Could you expand beyond those boundaries? When was the last time you reviewed your UX for simplicity? Do you have collaboration and connection with other systems? And is your organizational design set up to facilitate cross-functional collaboration? So are you ready to become a product or a life-centric organization? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Maggie. That was very interesting. You mentioned about the importance of firstly evaluating within our organizations itself, whether we're product-centric, and the importance of people to become a product-centric organization. Now let's switch over to learn from a real case study from an organization that's made that transition towards a product-led or product-centric organization. And for that, I'd like to hand it over to Debbie.
Thank you so much. Good evening, everyone. I hope you're still with us. My name is Debbie McMahon, and I am the Product Director for FT.com, at the Financial Times. FT.com doesn't really mean anything in and of itself, but that means that I lead the B2C growth for our subscriptions business, and I also look after the underlying platform that serves our journalism and journalists to deliver their content out into the big wide world. Previously, I was head of product of BBC Account, and before that, I was head of product strategy at Universal Credit. So I've worked in various organisations that have different degrees of product centricity, if I can say that word, and also that are different places on their journey. So I'm going to talk about three things today: focus, your colleagues, and understanding. And I hope in many cases I'm going to pick up on practical examples of things that have been talked about by the previous two speakers that will hopefully give you some really good hints and tips of how you can make this work in practice and the journey that we have been on in the Financial Times. But first, I'm going to ask you to pause and have a coffee or your beverage of choice, of course, given that it is the evening, and really think about one of the questions you were asked in Slido in the last discussion, which is, where are you at in terms of the product or user centricity is typically what I will use as my term in your organization. It's really, really important that you start from where you are, even if you'd like to be away over here. If you're actually down there, it's much better acknowledging that, recognizing it, and starting from that point, because trying to get to over here really fast isn't going to help you or the organization, and it's not going to bring people with you. So my first ask would be to really think about and be really honest, as was discussed before, about where you are in that spectrum and that continuum. That's what I did when I joined the FT. I've been here about 15 months. I really took time to figure that out. Doesn't matter if you've been in your organization for ages, you can do that at any point and re-reflect on where you're at in that journey. The second thing I would really say is that discussion that we had about sales-led or customer-led or founder-led or anything, multiple levels of what you can be led by is also really, really important. So again, if you weren't sure in this discussion, really go away and think about that. And if you were sure, fantastic. But then also I would ask you to think about one step further, which is what is realistic and what is sensible for your organization. I work at the FT. It is a financial news publication. We are never going to be a product-led organization, and nor should we be. It is our content that is our product. There is nothing without the content. So it's not just thinking about where you are now in terms of what is leading your organization, but also what is realistic and what is sensible, and what that means for the areas you should focus on, and what that means for you. For example, this is the mission statement I have for my product and my product set in the FT. Very clearly, it says right up front that me and my teams are here to deliver that world-leading content in ways that works for our customers. There would be no point in me putting it the other way around or talking about the product or the product set that goes around it. That's not what the organization would recognize, and also not what I'm here to do. So really think about how you're describing the vision you're headed for and what you're trying to achieve, and also what that means for how you set out the product strategy and what areas you focus on in terms of your product and user centricity. So now that you've had your coffee or beverage of choice, let's get into those three things that I talked about. So firstly, focus. All of us know that you really can't do and change everything at once. So what have we done in the FT? So firstly, it's think about that product strategy and how it in of itself can be more user focused. That can be for your individual team, can be for the whole organization, could be for a group. You can do it at any level. So in the FT, what did we do? About 2 years ago, actually, the CPO at the time set out a new product strategy that took the level of user focus onto the next place for the FT. Previously, we had one product strategy that said there was only one product, and we had different sales funnels, a bit like has been described in some of the examples before. B2B, B2C events, all essentially using the same product with one common set of needs, but being sold in different ways. That had taken the organization so far, but in order to move to its next level of product centered growth, and also being much more focused on the specific needs of our users, we split the product into these 4 areas: our specialist titles, community, which is our events business, ft.com and apps, which is me, which is the B2C business, and enterprise, our business. Doing that has allowed each product set to differentiate itself, become much clearer about what it is looking to achieve, and focus on much narrower, much better defined user needs. As I say, we've done this for a whole organization. If you can make that happen in your organization, amazing. But at an individual team level, you can do this too, by really being clear for each problem you're solving or each area you're working on, who is this specific thing for, rather than the totality of your user base. But if you can do it at this level, fantastic. Next, what else have we done in this area of focus and finding places where we can really push ahead in our product centricity? We've created a little speedboat called the Edit. It is a new product that we launched in February or March of last year, nearly a year ago now. And it has been built by an individual team that had everything in that team in order to be able to operate independently, so they could operate in a truly product-centric way, focused entirely on the users they were trying to serve. So what did that mean for us in the FT? Well, because content is still our business, as you can see, the content is front and center of this product. We had an editor called Malcolm, who is a journalist, editor of the Edit in the team. We have a picture editor who is also working with him, embedded in the team. We had a marketing person embedded in the team, in a way that every single day that was their full job, to work with the product team on both building, delivering, and iterating on this product. I call it a speedboat because it's something we're able to send out ahead and work in a different way that doesn't scare the horses for the entirety of the organization. To do something like this, you don't have to change everyone else's job or the way every other team operates. You can show people what is possible by being able to do something new. Doesn't necessarily have to be a new product. It could be an individual problem that you're trying to solve within a team, or an individual project. We had the luxury of doing a new product. If you can, that's amazing, because it gives you the beauty of being able to start from scratch on how you design and build things. But even without that, you can do something that really does take the way of working much further than you could if you were trying to change, say, a whole area at once. So that would be my second tip on focus, is find the area that you can send ahead and see what that delivers for your organization and what challenges you hit. If you're focusing, funnily enough, that means that some areas will lag behind. And the whole point is that that's okay. Do the hard things first was something one of my old bosses said. And that's sort of what we've done by focusing on areas where, for example, our journalists are really heavily involved in the product work. That doesn't mean some other stuff isn't hard and it's not lagging behind. Am I currently involved in a big fight with finance about the funding of one of the things that I want to do? Yes, I am. Do our procurement processes still not really allow me to, test out different bits of technology or different things that we would like to in a much more lightweight way than I would want to? Yes, that's still the case. And all these other areas that are here are areas where we've maybe made percentage improvements, but not as far as we would want to, or where we're still lagging behind. But that is okay, because if you're trying to do everything at once, you will end up doing nothing, and you will end up having everything pulling you down, and you'll hit many brick walls. So pick that one or two hard things that will have a real impact on how your organization works. Back to my first point, really figuring out where you're led from and where you are on that journey. And don't worry about the fact that other things will be difficult as you go along. Those will come in time. Finance is one of my challenges for 2023, as are a couple more on this slide. So my second area I said I'd talk about was colleagues, that you really, really need to know your business. I think all of us as product people know that it does really matter to us to understand the market that we're operating in, to understand our competitors, to understand how our customers use our product and how they operate and what they care about. But sometimes we forget that you need to know not just the market, but your very specific business. How does your organization tick? Who are I've put on this editorial, marketing, commercial, data science, people who are not typically involved in our product teams absolutely day to day, but that are absolutely integral to the complex web of us getting good stuff out the door that really meets the needs of the business in a way that is customer centered and delivers for our customers. You need to know who those people are in your organization, but also how you figure out and navigate the business. So how have I done that, and how are we doing that in the FT? Firstly, it's about time. There's so many pressures on product managers' time, but I'm just going to add another one, which is you really need to be present in places in your organization, particularly early on or at a point where you're trying to be more user-centered, where things are happening that you really need to be involved in. That can sometimes be hard. It can feel like muscling your way in, but I really encourage you to find that. For example, I lead the B2C business in terms of the product. And when I joined, I discovered that there was a B2C trading meeting happening every week where the numbers for the B2C business were gone through in great detail by my marketing colleagues. And there wasn't typically anybody from product present, or if they were sort of there to do a particular presentation and then go away again. They weren't an active participant in that meeting. I was very surprised, but that wasn't the expectation. Now I will go to that meeting as often as I possibly can. Particularly at the start, it was every single week. I'm there not just to listen and observe, but which I was at the start, but I'm there to add, contribute, ask questions, poke and prod a bit to make sure that we're completely aligned. And also I understand how that business is being run and how I can interact with it and how I can have the biggest impact. And there are countless of examples like that across the organization. If you haven't gone and sat with your customer care or customer success team recently, really heard the pain that those individuals, not just the customers, are going through, then you're not quite into the bowels of your business in a way that's really going to build you credibility, but also allow you to find the places where you can have the impact and the organization can then rely on you in order to support them. Next, OKRs. Love them, hate them, be indifferent about them. Other organizations use things that are not OKRs. There are different alternatives. At the FT, we use OKRs, so that's what I'm going to talk about. But if you use different mechanisms, then that's totally cool. The same principles will apply. It's really important that wherever you possibly can, that you use those processes or those things that are set up for the organization to bind people together to deliver shared outcomes. You don't want a growth goal here's a growth goal for grow the subscriptions business via the product and grow it via marketing and grow it via sales. You want one goal that you're all contributing to. We're definitely on a journey in this in the FT. When I joined right at the end of 2021, I kind of looked at the OKRs for that year and kind of they filled me with slight horror. And thankfully, I was able to mostly ignore them because there was only a few weeks left of the year. 2022, how did we get on? I think okay. There was a bit of top down that wasn't super helpful, and the product strategy hadn't really been developed enough to drive the OKRs, and there weren't enough places where there was clear ownership. This year, I think we've done much better in terms of being really bottom up, of teams working with their individual colleagues to figure out what it is they want to contribute to the organisation, and those laddering right up to the OKRs for the whole company. Much better driving of metrics. Oh, and I missed a C out in that slide. But there's still too many of them. We haven't had some of the really hard conversations to get down to the absolute fewest, most important things. So what do I hope for next year? Definitely more focused across the organisation, get the timings better. And if we're able to do that proper cross-organisational thing, we'll be able to make bigger bets. If your organisation doesn't have anything like this, if you kind of think, oh, wow, there's just no way that I can do anything like this because we're miles off that. What about in one individual piece of work or one individual project, creating some shared goals between some individuals? That's definitely possible. If you're going to improve a certain aspect or a certain process or a certain area, and you're going to do that with colleagues across business, could you all agree some shared goals? I bet you can at that level, and watch how that mushrooms and grows as people realize the power that has. Oh, and the other thing I would say is, if you're going to do something, if you do have a bigger sort of cross-organizational focus on things like OKRs, make sure that they're open and transparent to everyone. One of the tools that we were using last year, I moaned about all the time because the only people who could use it were people who worked in P&T. That doesn't help. It discourages people from getting involved if they feel excluded from the process. We've gone back to Google Sheets. That might seem painful, but in that regard, it's better because it's open to everyone. And then finally, understanding. I spend a lot of my time now, like one of the biggest aspects of my job is talking to other senior people in the organisation and just giving them a bit more information on how the product works, what our customers are responding to or not, and what that means for the choices we might be able to make or not be able to make. I'm sure all of us at some point have rolled our eyes at the idea we've been given and kind of gone, oh, why do people always come up with the thing that's the hardest for us to do? And my answer back to that is, because often you haven't told them that that's the hardest thing for you to do and really explained why. So two aspects of this, the framework that we have used in the FT for really getting the customer problems and what people are looking for from us out into the wilds of the organisation is jobs to be done. There are many other frameworks, but I think jobs to be done is really powerful in its simplicity and its usability in many different places. Like the language isn't exclusatory or feels like it's really complicated. So one of the things that really bound that product strategy of separating out the B2C and B2B growth was really being able to show the organisation that things like not just the price, which is what everyone previously assumed that was driving the differences in our customers, but that the value people were getting and how they were using the product really was fundamentally different. Not being able to show people that, I think, would have been, in a way that made sense to them, would have been much more difficult to get those decisions made to separate out the product strategy. So find places where frameworks and user insight can really help you demonstrate why you're making certain choices and why things could be different. And this slide is ugly on purpose because it sort of represents our world. We've done all this cool stuff, but yet there's all these things on top that we need to think about. I've put a whole load of tech things in there, but it's not just tech things, is it? I spent a half an hour yesterday morning explaining to a managing director of one part of our business about what happened with an incident that we'd had and how we dealt with it. Why did I do that? Because it's really important that he understands at some level the impact that things like that have on our ability to do other bits of work. Similarly, being able to explain that the constraints that you have within your product and where things are easy and where things are difficult is a world where often we have kind of hidden people away from. I'm not suggesting opening up the box entirely, but I am saying, particularly when you really want a true partnership, you do need to open that box a bit and be prepared to kind of show people and be honest about, in some cases, where your product is at and what things are difficult, and also why you might want to do some complicated technical work that nobody can really understand and the consequences of that. Opening that lid up makes that a bit easier. And very finally, I was asked to talk a little bit about measuring success. I have no metrics for you because I just don't think there are. Calvin up front had some good stuff about what the customer impacts might be, but for you looking inwards to the organisation, measuring customers' user centricity or product centricity, I think is really, really hard. But here's the 4 things I look at. Awareness. Did my team and I, did we get invited to the meeting? Did we know stuff was happening? Are we part of the consideration? So are somebody actually asking us to be involved if it's relevant? Are we the preference of the organisation? So are people saying, oh, like you're going to do that, aren't you? Or you're going to lead that for us? And finally, advocacy. It's so much more powerful if you don't have to be your own advocate all the time. It's much easier and saves you time. So I think I mentioned right up front, one of the things we've done is our speedboat product of the edit. The editor of that is called Malcolm, and I know that I can now happily send Malcolm round the organisation, not even just to other journalists, but as a journalist himself and as the editor of the edit, he will happily talk to people about this way of working, why he thinks it's worked, how sceptical he was, to be frank, up front, but now how he sees the value and why he thinks it's so important and why more people should get involved. Him doing that is so much more powerful than me or the product manager in that team, because it shows the journey he's been on and also how that can then reflect back into other people in the organisation. So ultimately, I guess I'm saying that my biggest measure of success here, and the thing I'm most proud of that we've achieved, and even if it's only in small pockets in the FD, is genuine advocacy for this way of working that then can live on without us as individual product managers. And I hope that many of you can get there too.
Thank you very much, Demi, for sharing the case study of your organization for that transition towards product-led growth and product centricity, you mentioned things like focusing, investing time, being proactive, and establishing OKRs to measure success. So now for the last part of this talk, we'll move to the Q&A section. So firstly, thank you very much to everyone for entering your questions. We may not have time to go through all of them, but we'll try our best to cover as many as we can. So my first question is to everyone. Firstly, how did you get buy-in from executives who are struggling with accepting product management? While my peers love product management, executive sponsorship is difficult. We can start with Calvin.
Sure, Kunal. And to be honest with you, it's a fantastic question, because I think, going back to my talk, I was talking about how in the beginning, when we were going through this product management transformation or becoming a bit more product centric, I was kind of like the person handing out flyers in the street, running around the organization, trying to convince everyone that product management was this great thing that they needed to buy into. And that didn't work. Just straight up didn't work, because again, like I said, it's a people thing. And immediately I go to my marketing director and I say, hey, we should be product led. And he's like, no, we shouldn't be product led. And, no matter how logical your argument is, you're not going to sway people, especially, as I said, product management is nascent. It's a people thing. There's many aspects to it that going around and trying to convince people that this is a good idea just doesn't quite break down that barrier. So from my perspective, I think the biggest traction that we started to see in terms of convincing executive stakeholders or senior stakeholders that being more product centric was a good idea was through evidencing how much success you can get through implementation of product-led techniques can be. I think Debbie kind of referred to that a little bit, right? You don't have to change the entire organization at once. If you can, in a small pocket, say, hey, look, we kind of created some OKRs for this small little project off to the side here, and we smashed our targets like 6 months before we thought we would, because you just gave us the empowerment to hit, to experiment and do the kind of the things that we thought would achieve that success. Those are the things that really start to build that buy-in, is more the evidencing of what success can look like if you implement some of these techniques, rather than trying to convince people.
Yes, I have the same exactly. I think that's a great answer, and that's the way to do it. I've tried running around. I saw there's a question as well about being the first PM in an organization, and that's who I was, the first PM, and nobody really knew what a product manager was, even though they hired one, and nobody had ever heard about agile or even product. They all operating in project modes. And there's no point just trying to explain, because it's very abstract and people just don't get it. They don't absorb the information. So just do it. Do the product management role. Do it as good as you can, because it's not going to be perfect, because you maybe don't have the full empowerment, the full structure, people on board with you. But do it as much as you can, step by step. Start with a small group, maybe one person you can partner with who gets it, and then do it. There will be some mistakes, going back to one of my points, and you can't be everywhere. So I let things happen which should never happen in a product organization, like projects, customized demands from customers. Let these things happen, because otherwise they're sucking your energy and you can't focus on the right thing. So really do that, and the evidence will be there. So evidence I've got from my experience is saving hundreds of thousands of pounds by not doing things that people are thinking of doing. Because it's all about, like as a product manager, the things that you're not doing, but you say no to, instead of, oh, we should do all those things. And you can show some real gains here. And that's how people are going to buy into, oh, okay, I think this is the right way to think about how to develop a product.
Yeah, I will. I'm going to be really boring and just say, yep, I agree. I'll just give a wee tip of my one of my mantras that I drum into my team, and say all the time is delivery builds trust. And if you get something done, people can't deny it. And particularly if you're struggling to get people to give you buy-in, then that delivery is the thing that makes people understand. And even if they only understand in that little pocket, that's better than nowhere. And that will then roll on to the next thing and roll on to the next thing. You keep delivering, you will get trust. When I worked in government, somebody complicated in the Treasury was trying to get me to agree to something, and when I turned around and said, like, in 5 years we have never missed a fixed date deadline, they kind of went, oh, if you just said that up front, I would have felt different. And it's amazing how much that actual reality of what happens can change people's mind, or at least help them move forward a bit. Project Gwyneth, the conscious uncoupling of our ad tech from our wider tech stack.
I'm glad you addressed that. Actually, I was good.
But mildly exclusatory if you haven't explained that to anybody, which is my point to my team, which is, you've called it Project Gwyneth, and that's funny, but like, no one else knows what that means.
I was too embarrassed to ask because I didn't know how to pronounce it as well. Okay, moving on to the next question then. This one, the author had asked specifically for Calvin, because I imagine you mentioned roadmaps, but I'm happy for anyone else to pitch in as well. How do you handle other teams that want to have specific dates against features? I often hear that a roadmap isn't detailed enough.
Yeah, I mean, this is a standard one, and kind of goes back to something I said in the talk as well, where people want a roadmap, but what they're actually asking for is a strategy. The only way people have presented strategy to them in the past has been in a roadmap format, so they think that's what they want. But in reality, it's about asserting what they actually need, not what they want. So it depends, and we kind of treat this in two different ways, right? Like, I don't put a date against I kind of think about a feature as being pre-discovery. It's an opportunity. It's not a feature until I've taken it through discovery. At that point, it's an opportunity. We could do it. It could drive value, but we haven't asserted that's the right thing for us to do. Going back to the process that I was talking about in terms of the product board's guide to product discovery, get rid of that thing as early on as possible if it's not valuable. And at that point, it's just an opportunity. So I would never put a date against an opportunity, because I haven't even done discovery on it, right? So that's kind of the one thing to think of. If it's an opportunity that is tied to moving your strategic objectives forward, then you don't have a date against it, because equally in 3 months' time, another opportunity may come up that's actually more of an optimized way to achieve that same strategic outcome. And I want the flexibility to be able to say that opportunity is now number 2 in my sequenced order of priorities, because it's not the highest value thing I can do with my money. However, small caveat, maybe big caveat, depending on how you want to see this. And another excerpt of Marty Kagan's book, Inspired. I know someone asked that question. What book was it? It was Marty Kagan's Inspired. It's one of the best product management books that are out there, at least in my very humble opinion. And the one segment that he talks about there is, there are going to be some sales teams that ask you to commit to something. That does happen. You can't get away from it in 100% of the times. So he kind of refers to them as high integrity commitments. And sometimes you are going to have to make some high integrity commitments. Like, the sales team have gone rogue and they've sold something you haven't built yet. Fine. You're going to have to put it on your roadmap somewhere. Just accept that. Or you've got a compliance thing like GDPR. You've got to do it by a certain date. We call those high integrity commitments. And with a high integrity commitment, just make sure that they're not dominating your roadmap. If like 80% of your roadmap is high integrity commitments, it means your strategy is just not being respected by your stakeholders. So just kind of think about those two aspects. Is it an opportunity? If so, it shouldn't have a date tied to it. It should be tied to your objective. And if it's a high integrity commitment, that's fine, but just make sure they don't dominate your roadmap.
Perfect, thank you. Next question for Magli. How do you communicate the product vision effectively?
So I would say, if you looked at my presentation, you'd see that I did not just talk at you, I interacted and I brought people in the conversation. So that's the way I would do it. And that's the way I've done it in my current company. So I would say, do it together. I'm not the one creating the vision and say, here you go, this is it. No chance to discuss. Actually, we did a workshop, and I did several workshops starting with my team. And also going into the office, I thought that was more convenient, even though most of my team is remote, but we had a team day so that other people could see us and we could bring them together in the room and say, hey, this is the vision statement we've got so far. what do you think? And they would come and say, oh, actually it's missing this, or I don't understand that. So bringing them together with you when you do that exercise, I think it's so valuable, because people feel part of it. They really think, as opposed to just doing some passive listening. So that's the way I've done it, and it's worked with all teams at all levels, teams that weren't at all in the technology side, like even finance, or even a new marketing team, for example, but also senior leaders have really taken this role seriously and have contributed. And at the end, we had a product vision, we had a mission statement as well, a whole breakdown of from very top level to something more detailed, which everybody bought into. So that's the way I would not communicate, but co-create the vision.
Fantastic, thank you. Anything to add, Debbie or Kevin?
So I was just going to add that agreeing with everything there, just the fact that everyone is different than you. I know for me personally, I hold a lot in my head and I forget that others don't have the stuff in their head that I've got in mine. So, and particularly if your vision is going quite far out, if you're going longer than 2 or 3 years, and things, you want things to feel and look quite different, giving people a taste of that, even if it is just a slightly hokey wireframe or something that people can grab onto to go, oh, I see what you mean, because not like a lot of us product managers are quite visual, and we don't necessarily need that, but other people in the organization often will, and there is a risk that without something to hang on to, that people can end up with quite a different view of the vision than you had. And even if you've communicated really well, the story they've told themselves is a bit different, and that's something I think we all need to remember.
And then we Calvin then?
Just trying to get off mute. I feel like I'm on a Zoom call. Yeah, I completely agree with both those points, actually. I mean, co-creation is absolutely the best way to build buy-in. You need to make the other people feel like it's their idea almost, right? Like, even if you end up with the exact same vision statement that you yourself would have sat in a room and drawn up, you're facilitating, you're leading the conversation potentially, but co-creation is the best way for people to be invested in the outcome. So I completely agree with that. I think that's super valuable.
Brilliant. No, sense. Going back to that inspired topic, when you guys mentioned co-creation, I know Marty Kagan very adamantly says brainstorming early is incredibly important, because it gets everyone on board and gets the vision, ensures everyone is aligned to the vision. So no, thank you. That's incredible. Moving on to the next question then, and again, this is for everyone. Can you give any examples of changes that you've seen which help people move from a project to a product mindset? So let's start with Debbie this time.
Oh, so I guess I think that we have a tendency to point to other organizations, and I have found in times that is helpful, but it can also lead to then a big long discussion about why we are different. So my view in this scenario would be to find the things that are similar or common. So, for example, working on the edit and saying to people, so what is similar about this to the rest of the organization is these things, but we know these things are different, but let's focus on the things that are similar, and creating that sort of acknowledgement that not everything is ultimately the same. And if you're looking to a different organization, they will have different structures, different people, maybe they're in a different country, but here are the things that are similar. I have found I found that the most powerful. It's, creating that commonality and things that people can recognize.
Magali, anything to add?
Yes. So the main thing with projects is, in general, there is a big Gantt chart with dates and milestones, and you know exactly what you're doing. And that's the thing that people were asking me when I joined the organization at the beginning. So actually repeating, for sometimes you have to repeat things over and over every time I was asked, oh, when is it gonna be ready? When can we give it to the customer? So these questions came from internal stakeholders, like colleagues, like customer success, sales, and also from the customers themselves, repeating over and over why we can't do that, because everything here we we know what we're doing. And as you said, Calvin, everything else is like an opportunity, and we're not quite sure yet. It hasn't been translated into a feature. Plus, also, it's the first time we're doing it. So how would we know? If I ask you today to build a house for the first time, even though you've studied architecture or something, maybe you don't know how long it's going to take. And that's the difference for me between a project and a product, in which I couldn't give estimate. And I think that worked, because now I've got less and less of those questions. And that's really highlighted the difference between we can plan everything versus we are discovering continuously.
Thank you. And Calvin?
Yeah, I mean, I know how adamantly I was talking about project versus product in my talk. I will caveat that as a corporate, we'll never truly get away from the notion. I mean, we're not just a corporate, we're a part of a French conglomerate with over 100,000 employees across the world, right? And French people do love governance. It's like a standard thing. We've got loads of policy frameworks, and a lot of that is geared to project management processes. And the thing is, again, you don't have to completely never talk about projects ever again. You can still be agile in the context of a project. Even if, like my organization, you can't get rid of the structure or the wrapper of a project or a program. And it really helps with reporting upward to our various group level stakeholders. What you can do is you can say, instead of at the beginning of this project, we're going to do a 3-month discovery period and then give you 9 months worth of scope in a 1-year fixed timeline for £1 million and X%. If you forget about that for a second, and you say, well, the project wrapper or construct is a way of getting funding. And the only thing I need to do to get funding is to indicate what value our stakeholders, in this case, whoever is giving us that funding, what value are they going to get back for that money? What is their return on investment for spending that money? And that's no different to the concept that you'd have if you were a startup, right? If you were a startup going to your shareholders, you would still have to go lobby for some next tranche of funding, and you'd have to demonstrate achievement of certain KPIs or OKRs, whatever framework you're using for measurement of success. You still have to demonstrate that, right? So kind of using it to your advantage and operating within that construct eventually will supersede the construct itself. Eventually people will say, well, we don't really need a project, do we? But it's about starting some of those principles around value as the first part of what's being considered in that project. Like, hey, what are the outcomes we're trying to achieve? Not what features do we want to deliver? And if you start there, slowly but surely, it will start to, the people and the colleagues involved in that project will start to have a product mindset almost automatically. So small changes like that can really have a big effect in the long term, I believe.
Fantastic, thank you. And I think we've got time for one more question. Magli, you alluded to this already in your talk, or one of your responses, I think. So someone mentioned that they recently joined a new government organization. They're the first recruit, and they're finding it incredibly tough. So I'm sure a lot of our viewers may be new PMs or aspiring PMs. Do you guys have any advice for people that are the first PM within their companies? Let's start with Magli this time around.
Yes, it is tough. I've been through that. 18 months and you'll be there. So just 18 months and you'll be halfway there. So I would say don't make assumptions about what they know. Don't make assumptions about the fact that they know what a product manager is. Assume they know nothing and you have to start from scratch. But again, instead of explaining everything, you will lose your energy doing that. Just do it. And don't be afraid of things being messy at the beginning. It's not going to be perfect product management. It's not going to be by the book from Marty Kagan, and it's okay. It's going to be messy. There's going to be a lot of uncertainty. People are going to make mistakes. Like sales teams sold products we didn't have. There were projects all over the place, and that's okay. You can't be everywhere. Pick your battles, and we trust that you're going to get there at some point.
Fantastic.
Yep.
Debbie, sorry. Yep.
Yeah, I was going to say I'll jump in now. Having worked in government, though, thankfully not being the first PM anywhere, I would say firstly, make sure that you have support structures and mechanisms that are not just in that immediate team. whether it's finding PMs in places you've previously worked or people you know, or through communities like Mind the Product. Also reach out to product managers across government departments like DWP, where I work, have many product managers and have had them for quite a long time now. So there are networks and groups of people who can be a bit of a support to you. Being a PM can be a lonely job, even if you're in an organization with many other PMs. So if you are the only one, absolutely make sure you have other people as a sounding board. I would say both inside and outside government, because there are some structures and parameters in government that are different. And then the one other thing I would say is where some of your red lines are. There is no point in fighting a battle, particularly early on, that either you're never going to win or is not worth fighting. So if there are any things that you just should steer clear of or stay away from, particularly as the one person who has to have that discussion and argument, and particularly, as Melanie said, if you're going to focus on getting that stuff done, then find those spaces, test out the boundaries, and then to start with, stay within them. I'm not suggesting you do that forever, but at the start, stay inside that space, get some stuff done, and you'll find the space grows.
Fantastic. And Calvin?
Yeah, I mean, those are all fantastic pieces of advice. I think having a community is really important. I'd say the first thing is to establish, from my perspective, the first thing I would be trying to do if I was the first product manager in an organization. I also haven't had the fortune or misfortune of being the first product manager anywhere. Although we built the function together, we kind of co-created it over the last 2 years. I would say the first thing you need to establish is, what are your objectives? Like, what are the things that your function is there to achieve? And lean on that. For the processes and all those good things, those are things for you. You think about yourself as a product management function. Those are things for you to effectively perform your role. I think the important thing to understand is, what does success look like for your product and for your team within the context of the business? I don't know the context of your particular area within the government, but it may be reduction in cost or operating efficiency. It may be improvement in sentiment of the users that are using whatever experience it is that you're exposing, or it could be internal reputation. Whatever that measure of success is, understand your North Star metric and understand then what are the opportunities that exist to move that North Star metric. I think that's the most important place to start.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, everyone. I think that brings us to an end of the Q&A. Thank you very much, everyone, Debbie, Calvin, and Magli, for your presentation and talks. I'm sure everyone found it incredibly helpful. For those listening, I hope you found today's talk helpful, and please continue to follow us on the meetup page for the next product event. So we'll look forward to seeing you at the next ProductTank event. Thanks, everyone.